I want to talk about Atari. I know, that's no big surprise. I talk about Atari and its products a lot here on this channel. And for any given video I do, there are always a handful of commenters who lament, "This isn't the real Atari," or "The current Atari is just a ghost of the company you claim to love, John." Well, for starters, I don't have any love for any company named Atari or otherwise, but rather, I do have an affinity for the products with that brand that had such an indelible impact on my Gen X childhood. Even 20 years ago, when Atari was effectively dead, I was still wearing a Fuji t-shirt and enjoying Atari's contribution to gaming and pop culture. More than that though, and what made me want to produce this video, is all the hubbub over the limited edition Atari XP cartridges that kicked up a couple of weeks ago and the fan community's reaction to it. I'm going to get to all of that and make my points right after this.
If you're a Gen X grown-up, this YouTube channel is just the beginning. Go beyond gaming with a casual and humorous take on movies, music, TV, tech, pop culture, and more. Hear the weekly Gen X Grown Up podcast anywhere you like to listen, or visit genxgrownup.com/pod.
Hey there, welcome back to Gen X Grown Up. I'm John, and I am a Gen X Grown Up. Thank you so much for taking the time to click on this video. Now, there's a lot I want to cover, but it would take forever, so I'll try to keep this as succinct as possible. To bring you up to date, about 2 weeks ago, a user on X by the name of Cear Dragon posted that 2 of their limited Atari XP cartridges, Haunted House and Crystal Castles, were defective. Haunted House, he claimed, had the PCB inserted backwards, and Crystal Castles, he said, was buggy and unplayable. Now, as these were limited releases, it seems that Atari support didn't have the ability to replace them, but rather offered a refund. Far from ideal if you're wanting to collect the whole set. Just in case you don't remember, the limited edition XP line were 10 classic cartridge reprints that included an illuminated acrylic top, a pin, a patch, a stand, and more goodies. They went for $100 a piece, making the whole set $1,000. And look up there they sit. I did a video on each one that was released, and I will throw a link to that in a playlist up here in the corner if you want to see that. From there, news outlets, YouTube creators, and enthusiasts over on Atari Age all went on the attack and seemed to use this particular incident as a focal point for their beef with Atari. How could cartridges that took over a year to produce have 2 defective games and ship that way? How could Newtari, a derogatory nickname that classic Atari gatekeepers love to use, how could they let this happen? I immediately saw other YouTubers doing editorial pieces about what a huge problem this is and how poorly Atari was handling it. I even had my own viewers ask if I would do a video about it to bring attention to the problem. But I smelled something a bit off. You see, my background is in journalism, so my first instinct was to start digging in and learn more. I messaged the Twitter user for more detail but got no response. I searched all the news outlets for articles about the problem, but they all were just referencing this one tweet with no corroborating details or further explanation. Many just referenced one another as sources in this little echo chamber. So as I was letting this simmer a bit, Atari themselves finally chimed in over on Atari Age just last Wednesday. So, what is the story from their end? Let's start with Haunted House. They say there have been 2 reports of Haunted House not working. 2. And it was more likely a faulty PCB, as it's effectively impossible to install them backwards, though that was possible with some older limited edition carts like Saboteur. They replaced one for the first customer and are working on a resolution for the other one, who I'm guessing is that original Twitter poster, but can't be sure. On Crystal Castles, there is a bigger issue here. They acknowledge there is a problem with some Crystal Castles carts. The code they say is fine, but the game behaves erratically. Some of the gems end up outside the map, effectively making the levels uncompletable. Atari is still diagnosing, and then they will determine what can be done when they know what the answer is in order to make customers whole. Atari reports they did replace carts until they ran out of stock, remember, limited edition, but a refund, I'll admit, is a poor solution when you have a matched set with spines that all spell Atari 50. I purchased the Atari XP set, but I was in the fortunate majority for whom everything worked as expected. Though still, there were some oversights and errors in the packaging that could and should have been caught before shipment. Now, it's not my intent here to defend or explain these problems, but rather to shine a light on the attitude of consumers who, on one hand, minimize the current Atari as not being the real Atari, and on the other hand, expect the current Atari to have all the resources and polish of the original company now 40 years past. Remember, the original Atari is the one that launched an industry and then ran said industry into the ground. The original Atari is the one that treated its own creative talent so poorly that many of the best left to form their own companies in order to be fairly compensated. The original Atari, that's the one that was once reportedly quoted as telling its top performing programmers that they were no more important to the process than the floor worker who put the cartridge in the box. The original Atari of old isn't a company to be celebrated. It was a product of its time, and it made, or didn't make, a number of decisions that ground its name into the dirt, eventually resulting in its IP being parted out and sold off. But what if an enthusiastic third party who genuinely cared about the legacy of Atari were to acquire its IP and work to revive its good name? Well, that sounds great, right? That's literally what has happened already. Atari was just a ghost of the company we knew as kids. It's now under the control and management of people who are finally working to bring the name Atari back to prominence and are, along the way, trying to make that a profitable venture, including possibly overpriced nostalgic cartridges. Now, admittedly, there's been some questionable stuff. Collectible arcade PCBs, cryptocurrency, NFTs, Atari hotels. For a while there, it really just felt like modern Atari was throwing everything at the wall just to see what would stick. But you know what has stuck? Doubling down on their retro gaming legacy. The recharged titles, new evolutions of classic IP, and acquiring other IP that aligns with that mission. Now, I don't have any insider information, but from my observations, it seems to me that the modern Atari is a relatively small company with a modest staff who are trying to live up to the legacy they've acquired, and sometimes fall short of expectations. I get the feeling that Wade Rosen and company bit off a bit more than they could chew. Products are taking too long to ship. I'm also still waiting on my silver box Mr. Run and Jump. And when there are problems, and by the way, there will always be defects in max runs of products. When there are problems, they're just not big enough or agile enough to handle them as quickly as consumers expect. Now, this is all how I see the situation. If you agree, well, that's cool. And if you disagree, I can respect that too. But tell me why. What are your reasons? Regardless of where you fall, if you're a creator and would like to add to this discussion, I invite and encourage you to chime in with a reaction video. And please @tag me so I don't miss your piece. Look, there's far too much name-calling, snarky jibes, and gross generalizations out there in the world, and I'd like to think that it need not be a part of this glorious retro gaming hobby that we all enjoy. And that's why I wanted to get my perspective on the situation out in the form of this video. Now, I will place some links to previous Atari editorials that I've done here and here. I certainly hope you found something to enjoy in this video, and I cannot wait to talk to you again next time. Bye-bye.